Hey, what's up, y'all? Excited for this next edition of Conscious Conversation with longtime organizer, movement mama, my friend, Carmen Perez Jordan. Looking forward to this conversation. There goes Carmen. Carmen's just getting in. Hello, everyone. Hope your end of the year is wrapping up nicely. Carmen!
Hi!
Hello!
Hi! Oh my God, I'm trying to figure this out, so bear with me as I... Okay, why is it about to fall on me?
No worries.
Hold on, Greg, I don't want you to fall. I don't want you to fall. Don't tell me this is a janky one. Not supposed to be janky. What's going on?
Hanging in there. Can't believe we're the last couple of days of 2020.
I know. It seems surreal, huh? Doesn't it seem surreal? Let's see who else is going to join us in the conversation. Let me tag my folks.
Absolutely. It does seem surreal, but we made it.
Yeah, we have, 2 days left?
It seems like I would joke around about how 2020 was the year that kept on giving. So it's particularly, I think you're right. It is a little surreal that we've been able to make it, but we're here. So,
yeah.
But thank you so much for taking some time, Carmen. I know there's a lot going on, so I'm particularly grateful for you to join us for this conscious conversation. For folks tuning in, we thought it would be a fun and exciting conversation to just reflect on the year. The year we're saying a year of struggle, a year of uprising, a year of community, and I think that there's lots of lessons and lots of things that I think that we could take from this year, and as we prepare for 2021. And you are one of the folks, Carmen, that I felt like could help us walk us through some of that.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you so much for connecting with me before the end of the year and just kind of reflecting, taking time to reflect. I think that's always necessary as we enter a new year. And so, yeah, just really happy to be here and excited about the combo, excited to connect with you.
Awesome. So I just wanted to just maybe before we dive in, maybe I can just share a little bit of your bio, Carmen, and I imagine some of this will also come up in our conversation. But just to give folks a little glimpse, because I know you've done a ton of things, but just to give folks a little bit of glimpse of the work that you've been able to do, the organizing that you've been able to do through the years. So y'all, this is, as I mentioned, my good friend and sister, Carmen Perez. She's currently the president and CEO of the Gathering for Justice, and is dedicated her 20-year career advocating for many of today's important civil rights issues, which include mass incarceration, gender equity, violence prevention, racial healing, and community policing. Carmen began as a probation officer in Santa Cruz, where she ran programming inside prisons, with a violence prevention and community development organization, Barrios Unidos, where she is now a board member. And Carmen also founded Justice League New York in 2014, and subsequently led several mass mobilizations which paralyzed New York City after the non-indictment of the officer who killed Eric Garner in December 2015. Many folks may also know Carmen because Carmen served as the national co-chair for the 2017 Women's March on Washington, where she brought over 500 partners together and facilitated a joint process to produce a statement of purpose known as the Unity Principles with 32 other women of diverse backgrounds. And that mobilization, that Women's March ended up being the largest mobilization in the world, right?
Yeah.
And so that, again, that is just a glimpse of the work that Carmen has been able to do. So we're really honored that Carmen's joined us for this conscious conversation.
Yes. So, I mean, it's so much. 25 years of organizing, all put in a couple of sentences. Just, it's a lot, you know. And I have to think about where you and I met, you know, in that, you know, period of time, you and I met in the middle, you know, of this work. And so I'm really excited to connect and just have a conscious conversation with you, because I think they're necessary, right? We learn a lot about like daring discussions and courageous conversations, but what does a conscious conversation look like entering 2021 and closing out 2020?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, just quickly on how we met though. I know that at the time I was with the US Student Association. And I'm curious from your vantage point though, Carmen, what is your recollection of how we met, and what's that story for you?
Was it 10 years ago?
It's been a minute.
Yeah, it's been a long time. So I remember we were both part of Generational Alliance. We were kind of like the youth organizers at the time. I was representing the Gathering for Justice. I had become a new ED, maybe still national organizer. I don't really recall, but I gravitated towards you because you love to dance. And we shared that kind of like infinity. I also came from the UC system. I came from California. There was just so many parallels of our connection. There was a bunch of sparks everywhere. And you know, I was telling my husband, I was like, you know, Greg is one of my best friends. And he's like, babe, Greg has his own best friends. And I was like, no. I'm like, I know my tocaya, Carmen Berkeley, is his best friend. I'm like, but, you know, in the movement, there are people, we've been kind of like lifelong friends in the movement, you know, and it's been a really beautiful experience for me as somebody. I was saying, you know, Greg is somebody I could rely on. Greg is somebody who's just a gentle soul who is so committed to the work. And I need people like that, because I think you really are the reflection of like my people in Oxnard, right? Like the people that I grew up in. Like you're really that, you're my folks. And so yeah, and so earlier today we received the gift that you sent, and he's like, okay, your whole mood is gonna shift when you see who sent you this box. He's like, your energy is just gonna be on 1,000. And so of course I opened it, said your name, and I was like, oh, it's great. Like, I knew it. But yeah, we met like a decade ago, it feels like, and we've been on this journey. It seems like, you know, there were moments when we were kind of like moving, and then there was times when we came together. We really came together during the beginning of Justice League NYC, where you and Alita really provided a lot of support to us in 2013, the beginning of 2014. And so, yeah, it's been a journey. It's been, I will say, one of my funnest relationships that I've had in any environment. You know, it's just always been on some really light heart stuff, doing the work, and with a lot of joy, sprinkles of a lot of joy everywhere, you know. Awesome. What's your recollection?
Yeah, no, I definitely remember that. I actually feel like one of the first times that we really got to like, it was also to the Generation Alliance, but there was a conference in DC called, I think, Take Back America, or something along those lines. And we were like part of the youth delegation. it skewed older conference, it skewed whiter conference. And so we were not only young, but we brought all the people of color. And we just like, we spoke our truth. And I think it was, people were like reckoning with, wow, these folks really believe what they are saying and are bringing so much energy. And we definitely brought the hype and the energy. And I feel like it was such a needed intervention because this conference had been happening, but it wasn't representing the folks that were closest to the pain and that should be closest to the solutions and closest to the decision makers. And so, and that for me was also just when I think about that, I also thought about the organization that you were leading and building. I thought about the people that you brought to the table and your intentionality of always like I know you use the term like become a femtor, like as someone who was always like making sure you were helping develop and bring up the next generation of organizers. And no matter what organization or what campaign or mobilization, that was always something that I saw and appreciated about you. It was like, yo, Greg, meet this other person. Meet this other person that like is dope and is an organizer, and you made people feel really welcome. And so that for me was something. And that's when I call you a movement mama. I know you're a literal mama now, but like you, I think helped bring so many folks along, and that's something that I'll never forget about who you are as a person, as an organizer, and as a leader.
Thank you. No, that's important to me. You know, somebody, you know, when I hear you say that, it reminds me of Nane, my mentor from Barrios Unidos, who always brought young people with him. It also reminds me of my mentor, Harry Belafonte, right, who has always cultivated, you know, from the time in which he was young and being, you know, a confidant to Dr. King and sharing the stories of him meeting with Eleanor Roosevelt and, you know, all these folks, Diane Nash, you know, but I think it kind of goes further. It goes a little bit further back in my life. It's really because of my coach, Pat Bow, when I grew up playing basketball. You know, Pat Bow was such a positive influence in my life during a time where there was, which I didn't know, a lot of trauma, you know, and Pat took me everywhere. He took a crew of us everywhere, you know, and he was in my life from the age of 5 all the way until I went to college. And so I think about Pat because Pat was really my first mentor. And again, when you're a kid, you don't have the language. Just the fact that you and I we were in these spaces that were like predominantly white, and we were like the people of color, like talking about our truths, right? Like that now is just so kind of bizarre, right? Like 10 years ago, it was kind of like the norm. But yeah, I do that because I feel it's my responsibility to pay it forward. You know, I was invested in, somebody took me under their wing and introduced me to other things other than my pain. And so I feel it's important to often remind people of their power, of their gifts, right? Expose them to things that are greater, that are already there. What my responsibility is just to help them flare it out, right? There's greatness in a lot of our young people. They're already bold. I mean, they're a lot wiser. They're a lot more bold. They got some real dope mentors and femtors. Like, I think, you know, we also got to give our generation a little bit credit. But, you know, I learned so much from young people. And I think that's what I really appreciate from my relationship with, like, Nane and Mr. B and even Aida, is that as I'm praising them and so grateful for their knowledge, they're like, but Carmen, you know, it's kind of a two-way street. So my young people are dope. You know, I want to shout them out. Jasmine Dallafas, Cynthia Gutierrez, Chris Arroyo, Luis Hernandez, you know, oh my God, please don't let me forget my folks. Bria Baker is another one of my young people. Brooke Baker, Karis Love. There's just so many, you know, young, dope people. There's also Natasha, who's running for office, city council. Like, these young people, Greg, are phenomenal. You know what I'm saying? And I'm just so grateful. Like another group of young women that I've recently been working with who I think are just such a force are the Monterosa sisters, Michelle and Ashley, who've been advocating for their brother Sean Monterosa. They're just, they kind of remind me of that Carmen that you met, you know, a decade ago.
Yes.
With Generational Alliance, like that, just bold and fierce and just kind of straightforward Carmen. You know, I've become a little bit filtered in the last couple of years with, you know, being the spotlight of some really hard shit. But they're, you know, they're bold, they're brave, they have no fears, and they're speaking their truth. And so I'm honored that I get to like be in space with young people because they kind of keep me hip. You know, they remind me to put my hoop earrings back on, you know, so yeah.
Definitely. No, I definitely feel that. And I feel like even for me, as I meet more young people, I'm like, yo, these folks know even more. They're even sharper. They're more politicized than I think I was as a young person and as a youth organizer. So it gives me a lot of hope, especially in these kind of trying times that we're in, that young people understand and get it. And as long as we create space and nurture and support them, they'll be able to take our world to a new level. So that kind of leads me to my first question, Carmen, about just this year. I feel like this year we kind of joked about it at the beginning about how like this was the year that kept on giving. We've clearly gone through a pandemic. I'm curious, just like, are there any, as we're winding out this year, are there any reflections or things that you think are helpful to share as it relates to kind of how you navigated the multiple crises, how you kind of understood or related to all the different layers that kind of were put in front of us, you know?
Yeah, I will say that this year has been a year of a lot of pain. We have experienced health crisis in our communities, and have lost a lot of loved ones because of it. You know, my niece is a frontliner, she's a nurse. But you know, my mom lost her sister and lost a nephew, and we lost a volunteer named Maxine who was an elder. We lost another elder of ours, and so it's been a lot to deal with, right? A lot of folks have lost their jobs, and what we have been saying for a long time is that there's an urgency, right? There's an urgency for us because of the fact that as we walk home from a detention center, there are still children laying their heads on a cold bed, right? As we are able to hang up the phone with a mother of Eric Garner, she's still feeling the pain of losing her child, right? And not receiving any type of justice. And so what this year did is that it brought it to your face, right? It made people pay attention. As you know, I think about the amount of people who have participated in, you know, the BLM movement or the police accountability brutality movement, is that people were not allowed to turn the channel, right? It was on every channel. Because of the fact that we were under a pandemic, that's what the news had to report, as well as the fact that people were not going to take their kids to soccer practice, or were not going to that evening program, whatever it was. And so what I also know is that the movement has matured significantly, right? When I think about organizing the Women's March on Washington in 2016, we were faced with a lot of the unknown, right? Like, well, what's going to happen under this administration? organizations were really working in silos and pockets, and now folks are just open to working with one another. That's what the virtual space has provided for folks, is that you and I are now connecting on a whole different level than what we were actually connecting with about a year ago, right? And so, you know, I'm gonna constantly remind people to take a break, right? I'm gonna constantly remind people that they are loved, and that there's a lane for them and whatever they choose to be a part of, especially this movement. And I know for myself, I've taken a step back. I've made a conscious decision to cultivate the next generation of leaders to be on the front lines as I have given birth to a new child, right? And it's been hard as somebody who has been on the front lines for so long, but I got to make room for others. And I also have to allow for mistakes, and call people in with a lot of love. And so I'm trying to model something to the world that may not always be modeled in these spaces, right? Where we see folks that have been in their role for 2 decades, for 4 decades, right? I'm also really trying to alleviate some of the pain that we're feeling, alleviate some of the tension by calling in people with love, instead of, you know, participating in this call out culture, and really trying to provide solutions. And again, I think, you know, I saw something that either you wrote, like, I'm not always on the front lines, right? A lot of the organizing that we actually do, Greg, is behind the scenes. It's strategy, it's mentorship, femtorship, it's cultivation, it's trying to make sure that families are feeling connected, right? This so many of the people that we work with are, yes, definitely connected to the pain and the solution, but they've never got a degree in this work, right? There's no 4-year university. You don't choose this path, like it chooses you. I didn't choose to go into social justice because that was like, hey, Carmen, like, you're the next one. No, I chose it because, or it chose me because of my losing my sister and having family members that were impacted by incarceration. And so, you know, I think that this year allowed us to witness the maturity of a movement that has been working for quite some time. You know, I think I was watching this moratorium on the Chicano movement, right? The 50 years, and they were fighting against police brutality. They were fighting to be seen. And I'm like, man, my ancestors, my elders got like gunned down, and they were fighting for this 50 years ago, right? And like, why are we still in the same fight? What do we have to do? And so sometimes you have to stop, right? Mr. B talks about the movement never ended, it just took a deep breath, right? And I think we have to pause and take a deep breath and actually acknowledge the work that has happened in the past. But the conversation is also shifting. We're having a very US-centric conversation around race. Even when it comes to the Latino community, we are still operating through this binary lens that so many of us have rejected. It's the reason why we've claimed identities like Chicano, because we did not want to, we were missing from the black and white conversation, right? And somebody who's API could understand that. So there's a lot that has evolved. There's language that is showing up. We're doing things where we're actually connecting to more people virtually than we ever have in physical form, which I truly believe that the physical form, once it's safe, needs to, you know, be part of our organizing strategy. But we have to get smarter. We cannot perpetuate or use the tactics of white supremacy to define who we are. We have to completely decolonize our minds and our strategies and even our language when it comes to any type of conversation, whether it's talking about a nonviolent movement or talking about racial justice. It just, we need to go a little bit further. But for the gathering, we had gone virtual prior to this pandemic. And so we were able to make the adjustment rather quickly because of the fact that we were wanting to reach more folks than we were reaching in New York City. And so we've also made other adjustments where, you know, personally, as somebody who's been in this space as a youth organizer for like 25 years, you know, I wanted to make sure that the person that was organizing youth was actually a youth themselves. And so bringing on Lewis to be our director of youth engagement and youth leadership as an 18-year-old is something that I'm really proud of, because Lewis has been with us for about 4 years when his brother was wrongfully accused and sent to Rikers. You know, you see something in young people, and then it's funny because your elders, when you're younger, they tell you, I see something in you, and you're like, yo, these people are kind of weird. But then you ultimately pick that up and you're telling young people, and they're looking at you like, yo, this woman's hella weird too. But he came along, right? And so I think for us in the gathering, we're really trying to model the beloved community that Dr. King talked about. We're trying to be intentional, not only with our organizing and cultural organizing, our activism, or the way we show up, but we're also making room for the younger generation to truly lead and guide us, especially because we're an intergenerational organization. And we're trying to, you know, understand, you know, and listen a little bit more than always provide solutions, you know?
Yeah, definitely. You said multiple things that I kind of just want to lift up, because I feel like there was a couple of good nuggets there that I think are important to kind of pull as you were listening. I was listening to all that you were saying. So one of the things that I want to lift up is your point around kind of what people were like, kind of how the pandemic in particular forced people to kind of see the inequities and feel the inequities at a different scale, right? Like while we were dealing with a global health pandemic, we were in the midst of a climate crises. There was the fires, the earthquakes, the storms. There was volatile election season and questions about democracy, and folks feeling like we're in a democracy crisis. And I think that, and through that all, it was people of color who were disproportionately impacted. And so before the pandemic, we already knew that these systems were stacked against us. We already knew that these systems weren't designed for us to thrive and to be joyful and be our full selves. And so it kind of like hit differently. And then to your point around even the summer of uprisings, right? Like, another piece there that I appreciated you say is like, yes, that was a huge moment. It led to the largest uprisings in the US, according to the New York Times. And it got there because so many folks organized to get to that moment. That the Black Lives Matter, the movement for Black Lives, wasn't just a one summer thing, but it's been happening. It's been building and growing in different parts of the country and globe. And this was just a example of a type of flashpoint and a big point that kind of harnessed this energy. And so I think for me, you saying that is also just another reminder that like, how are we helping people understand that history, helping people understand how we even got to this place now of like what even led to all of those things coming to head in that way. And even as sometimes when I talk to folks even about the history of the US, I'm like, no, colonizers literally stole this land, facilitated a genocide, stole folks from Africa, brought them here to build a system that they still can't like benefit from. And it's not just a blip in history, but that's actually the foundation of like this country and the foundation of the systems that exist in this country. And it's the dehumanization and the racism against Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And so it's just, for me, that was like a reminder. And I think that another piece that you said that I appreciated too was just like the work is not always we're not always on the front lines. And sometimes the most important work and the most integral work is the work that happens behind the scenes, behind the cameras, behind, like, outside of the social media posts. And as we are building and building relationships and learning and growing with learning more about ourselves and growing our relationships with other people, it's a challenge sometimes, especially in such a technological, like, so many folks use technology now. Like, the use of technology is so different than what it was like for us even growing up. And I, like, still joke that I still remember hearing, like, the AOL dial-up modem, signing up for internet. And folks don't understand, like, things have changed so much. And so, like, how do we find that balance of making sure that we are grounded in the history, but also still can take those lessons, take those best practices, and use it moving forward, despite the conditions changing, and they will continue to change, right? I think is the other thing I'm hearing you say, is like, things will continue to change as more organizing happens, as more of us face and feel like the impacts of these systems.
Yeah, so true. And you know, I also think about like, there's been so much change. You know, when I remember going into the prisons, and you couldn't take a phone in there, so there was no way to get a hold of Carmen Perez, right? Like, people were like, what the hell, Carmen fell off the face of the earth. And then two is the fact that, like, you weren't showing off that, or you weren't showing that you were at a prison. And it's very different now, right? I think, you know, somebody talked about, I think it was Karis Love, she talked about performative activism, right? So as we're seeing people on the front lines and still fighting for families, and a lot of families are speaking up for themselves, and they're finding their voice, and it's so beautiful, supported by organizers that are coming and providing, you know, assistance. But there's also a lot of performative activism, right? And so, yes, it's evolving, it's changing. And you know, I think a lot about the time that Mr. Belafonte was part of the civil rights movement, and I'm sure they had that too. You know, I was in the office in New York City, and right by our printer, there was a telegram that was sent to him by Dr. King. And it would take months for them to receive one message, right? And so that's how come it took them, you know, a longer time to organize the March on Washington than it took us to organize the Women's March on Washington. It's because we had access to social media. We had access to a phone that could, you know, give you information at your fingertips. But I just think a lot about that. And, you know, there's, you know, and I'm of the mind, there's a lane for everybody, but there's also, you know, a shift in the way we're thinking about organizing, right? And that's why not all organizing or strategies are public, right? Because we have to be able to keep some of these things to ourselves. Like I mentioned, in 2016, the conversation was so different than the way we're having it now. Like, you know, intersectional feminism was a theory, right? It wasn't necessarily something, now it's a buzzword. Everybody's talking about intersectional feminism. But when Kimberly Crenshaw was talking about it, and why it was important for her to use that term, you know, we were still trying to convince people in 2016 that it was a real thing, right? Like that Black women needed to be at the center. And I think Black women are now demanding that, right? They're no longer, we're no longer having to shout it, is that they themselves are demanding to be at the center. And there's those of us like you and myself that are like, what can we do? You know, we got to step back to make sure that we're supporting them and not reharming them as we are centering them, you know?
Yeah, I appreciate you naming that too, Carmen, because I think that that's been, at least for me, as I think back through the year, that was one thing that I was reflecting on, was the role of the role of anti-Blackness and how it's so pervasive in Asian communities. I know, at least this is my reflection, and how that became such an important part of the work that I had to do was how do I help facilitate conversations around anti-Black racism and anti-Blackness in Filipino and Asian American communities, and to help people understand that white supremacy actually drove these wedges between us. That yes, you inherit like it is part of the system that we are part of, and now is how we are socialized. And and I'll be honest, like some of the most difficult, challenging conversations for me were with my parents, with people in my family who, I think love me for who I am, and so I'm able to speak to them in a different way. But to to be able to figure out how do we leverage this moment so that they can understand why we have to fight anti-Black racism, why there is this thing called divide and conquer that white supremacy uses to try to literally divide us. And even as I talk to folks about the model minority myth and the history of the model minority myth, that for me was one of the biggest challenges, but also where I got a lot of hope, because I think as more people learned, as people were curious, and they sparked more interest in the history and the truths about how racism and white supremacy are so pervasive, and why. I think I saw a lot of people really interrogate that within themselves and figure out how they could kind of show up. And so I want to just name that, I think that's an also important part of this work is how do we center the Black folks? How do we provide them the support so that they can lead, but also we help bring our people along with us and they understand why we are creating those spaces or making these types of decisions.
It's so, I don't know about you, but my parents are monolingual Spanish speakers. And so not only are you trying to share, right? Like my father's Chicano. So my dad was born here in 1924. He faced a lot of the racism that was put against him and his family, like deportations, the Repatriation Act, all those things. Like there was constant government interruption to criminalize my father and their family, right? But my mother being from Mexico, she doesn't have that historical analysis of the U.S., right? And it's not even required for her to even understand. But there's a language barrier that her and I have, right? And so even using words like white supremacy, that's such a U.S., right? Racial construct, that's all U.S., right? It's not like something that she understands, because there's no, outside of like colonization and all these other things, right? She doesn't really understand that. And so the way in which I was thinking about even these race conversations is the fact that you have to learn a whole different language, right? And you also have to unlearn a lot of the things that you were taught, like how you were saying, some of the things we talk about this in our organization. And even when there was this crisis that happened with myself, Tamika, and Linda, is that we did not realize that anti-Semitism was being weaponized, right? In order to take down 3 women of color. And also the method was it was really grounded in anti-Blackness, right? And so at the time when you're in the midst of it, somebody put it like this, like us 3 were like in a burning house. And so we couldn't help one another because we all had fire, like these wounds from this fire, right? But even reflecting back, and even some of the communications pieces, I personally did not feel comfortable in doing certain things because that would be seen as anti-Blackness. And that made me question the way in which anti-Blackness is in the fabric of this country, and we don't even know it sometimes, right? And so in this time, in the year of 2020, what I've been committed to doing is unlearning. I have been participating in conversations where a lot of the listening is of stories from Black folks, right? Like our sister Jamila Burley, she like, you know, they invited me to be part of this Yahoo allyship thing. And I was like, there's so much I need to learn. And I know people are like, well, ally, that's kind of passive. So that's all semantics. But the beauty about it is the fact that I am not the expert, right? I am not the person leading the conversation. I am an active participant. I am somebody who is like really struggling and really wanting to understand, right? And it's just so beautiful that that would even be provided to people like ourselves. But I've committed myself to unlearn so much. And it's you know, even with you, Greg, like, you know, the anti-Asian racism that was happening because of Trump, right? Like, it was not about allowing anybody to continue to perpetuate or to even say some of the crazy shit that was happening, you know? And so I just, you know, I want to show up with my authentic self in places, but sometimes it's not leading.
Yeah.
You know?
No, I think that that's such a important point because this stuff isn't easy. Like there's like, and I think I appreciate the reflection around this is a year of unlearning because like one thing that I've been reflecting on is I want to be able to remain humble enough to know that there's always something more that I can learn or unlearn, and that I want to be able to be in a place where I can go into a space, I can meet somebody new and welcome whatever new wisdom or knowledge or experience that they are willing and able to impart on me. And I want to be able to I want to be able to be that lifelong student. And I think that I try to ground myself that no matter how many years or experience, or no matter what types of things I've gone through, that there's still something more there. And as I've gotten older, that's also just served me well in that I think that people appreciate that. I think sometimes people kind of act like they know everything, act like they don't have anything else to learn, and that turns people off, I feel. And so when you have that kind of humility, when you actually are able to operate with that kind of, and be humble in that way, I think it welcomes people to make those mistakes, to ask those questions that maybe they are afraid to ask, and to like create and foster and nurture a space that is more where people can be vulnerable and be willing to bring their full selves, even if it's not you know, even if it might be a mistake or something that they're scared about, you know.
Yeah. No, it's true. It's so true. Man, like I said, the movement has evolved, our language has to evolve, and our heart needs to evolve. You know, like there's just there's so much that I'm learning, and it is literally like learning a new language. And it's because, you know, as I try to explain to my mom in Spanish, like I'm like, oh, I don't really know how to say that word, you know? And so everything is just, and it's also, I think, part of what I'm learning, especially now having children, it takes a lot of patience, you know, a lot of this. The work for me is not in the next year or four. The work for me is really trying to figure out how I could dream about what the next 20 years looks like. You know, it's about what's going to be the next blow that we receive. And that's the way in which other individuals operate with a lot of resources, right? They're not thinking about their little 1 year strategic plan. They're thinking about who are we going to put into office in 20 years, right? And that's the way in which I really want to think about things. You know, I mentioned earlier one of our young people, Natasha, running for city council. And I've been really thinking about, you know, if I'm so dissatisfied with who's running for office, right? One, I grew up playing basketball. So I was basically told, like, you're either in the game, right? Playing the game, or you know, you can't be a critic on the sidelines. You got to be in the game, right? And so I feel like I can't be a critic. I can't be somebody who's constantly complaining about the elected officials that we have if we're not putting our own people in office, right? And so I just can't think about it in a 1 or 2 year increment. I want to be invested in. I want philanthropy, whoever, to invest in our ability to dream about what our future truly looks like in the next 20 to 40 years.
Definitely. Let's stay on this thread a little bit, Carmen, because I think that even as we're preparing for a new year, and this is related to a question that we got in the Mark submitted a question, and so I'm gonna share what Mark wrote, but then I'm gonna kind of add to it. So Mark's question was, how do you see 2021 playing out in terms of returning to normal? Which I would then add, how do we use 2021 to prepare and help orient folks to that longer term thinking, to that 20, 30, 40 year vision? And I'm curious if you have reflections on that.
I think the conversation starts small, right? I think we get derailed when we try to host a large conversation and bring everybody into the conversation. I think that we need to start small. I think that, again, you know, I've recently have co-founded an entity called CSWS with a group of women. And my goal was to make sure that the Latino community showed up, particularly Latina women showed up to vote. And also was able to talk about their nails and their eyebrows and, you know, getting their lashes did. Everything that we love, right? Music, coquito, everything, right? Our culture. But I'm also, you know, thinking, what does it look like to have a conversation around what it means to be Chicana in the United States in the present time? And so part of that is dreaming with people, is having these type of conscious conversations, and being able to dream. Like I want to have dream sessions with folks. I want to be able to like sit with you and yes, reflect about where we were and take back America and how white it was, right? But I want to say, okay, what does take back America look like in 20 years? What does it look like, you know, Mark, what does it look like for you? What does, you know, 2020, I think, you know, when are we going to do a year of planning? Everything's about action. Go, 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 right? You know, I believe in the fact that what we say or our thoughts become our words, become our actions. But in reality, like, are we even dreaming right now? Do we have, we're still in a nightmare. The fact that our democracy has constantly been compromised. Donald Trump, I heard New York Attorney General Letitia James on The View this morning talking about the fact that Donald Trump is being put through civil court. And after January 20th at 12:01 a.m., January 21st, they might be pursuing criminal actions against him. And what's crazy to me is the fact that we had a president who's going to be like brought up on some very serious, you know, some very serious allegations. He's been running our country, right? So we've been going from crisis to another crisis to another crisis, to the point that some of us, I don't want to use the word, we're not burned out, right? Because there's always going to be fire in our heart to do this work. Some of us were just built to do this. We're going to show up. We're going to continue to cultivate others to show up. But I will say, at what moment do we take that deep breath that Mr. B talks about and actually dream about a better future? When does that happen? And how does it happen? And who does it happen with? And I'm ready to have that dream session with somebody.
Yes.
I'm ready to build that future, because in the past, it was just me. It was just Carmen. I was like, you know, I'm ready to die for this movement. I'm ready to give my all. But now I have 2 children that I got to make sure have a better future than I did, you know, and it's no longer just about me. And so I want to be able to do it, not just for the young people that are incarcerated that I always have on my heart. I don't want to just do it for my elders that sacrifice so much, but I want to do it for my own children who deserve better than what's been left for them.
Absolutely. Well, sign me up, Carmen. I'm down for a dream session. I'm down to unlock all the radical imagination that we can muster. And I also would just one thing that you said that made me think about this, and in response to Mark's question, is that I don't want to go back to where we were. I want to be able to use the moment that we are in now to maybe feed these opportunities about what is possible. I want to use the opportunity now to get folks revved up and ready to be able to not only dream those big dreams and dream those alternate futures, but also play an active role in making it happen. Because for that to happen, we all need to play a role. And as Carmen, you said, everyone has a lane. Everyone has something that they can do to be able to make that happen. So I see a lot of folks commenting, saying that they're down and they're ready. So that's exciting. I think folks are ready to dream. I think folks are ready to unlock that radical imagination and to transform our communities in this world for the better. Whew, I'm feeling a lot more hopeful already, Carmen, just having this conversation with you.
I also one day, my dream the last 15 years has to create a federal mandate on system accountability. And what that means and looks like is that I want to go into communities and change the way we look at systems. And I will say this, because I think, this is probably like a bigger conversation than like an IG Live, is the fact that oftentimes we're responding to crisis, right? Mm-hmm. We're constantly responding. When it comes to probation reform, we're looking at it through a policy perspective on a statewide level. But really, things happen with individuals. Change happens internally, right? And when I was working at the probation department, I wasn't hired because I had a criminal justice degree. I was hired because I had a heart. It's the reason why playing basketball, we won championships, was because I had heart. And I say that with so much love, because the way we're going to change the system is by making sure that we stop incentivizing failing systems. We stop giving money to police departments that are failing, to probation departments that are failing, that we actually incentivize, right? Systems that are creating positive opportunities for our young people, that we incentivize the fact that we are creating better relationships with individuals in these communities. And so if we're talking about dream sessions, I'm having a dream session with you, and I'm manifesting, I'm putting it out there that one day I'm going to be able to sit across with a group of people who could dream about how we're really going to change the system from the inside out.
Yes. I appreciate you sharing that, Carmen, and I got you. Let's make that happen.
Make that happen too. We manifesting 2021. We manifesting.
Yes, definitely. All right, so I have a couple more questions because we have a couple more minutes left, if that's okay, Carmen.
Yes.
To kind of so one question that I like to ask is, and I think you've exhibited this many times, but I'm curious if what your response would be here is, when was the last time you felt brave?
Ooh, oh man. So I really have to think about this. And so I feel brave in my home often when I make, I recently gave birth on September 20th of this year, and I had a very interesting, what you would say is a normal experience for Black and Latina women in the healthcare system, where I was being pressured to have a C-section. And I know my body out of anybody. I've been with this body for 43 years, and I know my body, and I knew that I just needed like an hour or two more in order for my body to be ready to push out my baby. But this woman was so adamant about, taking my baby from my body. And so I felt brave when I made the decision that I said to her, look, I will plug everything out my arms and I will walk home and wait till this, like we squat babies, like I'm part Huichol, like we are Aztec, you know? And so I felt a different type of brave when I advocated for myself. And you know, an hour later, my baby came, right? After 4 pushes, I you know, like I said, we squat babies. It was my basketball squat. That's really what it was. That
Yes.
I brought that in, but I haven't felt brave in a long time. You know, I think with this work, um, and maybe I, you know, I need to just connect with more people. But you know, when we were accused of anti-Semitism, which was a wrong accusation, I envisioned a world where we would be protected by our sisters, that there would be a chain of love that said you could not falsely accuse our sisters of something, right? You cannot weaponize a community. You cannot attack a community. And that then we would be called in with love to kind of repair the harm that was done, right? And the last time I felt the bravest was when I was on the stage on January 21st, 2017, talking to my people in Spanish. And I felt unapologetic. I felt proud to be a Mexican American, proud to be a Chicana, proud to be a woman, proud to be a survivor, proud to be a daughter of an immigrant, proud to be somebody who worked in the fields. I was proud, and that was taken from me because when you are put on a spotlight, you're not given the resources to be protected. And I've what I've done instead of saying that it was wrong to be accused of this, what I've done is I've leaned into the controversy and I actually began to have conversations with the Jewish community in order to build a better understanding and relationships. But it's been painful and it's taken a lot from my heart. It's taken a lot. And I was pregnant at the time that these allegations happened. And I see it in my baby, the intensity of what I went through. I see it in my 2-year-old son. And so I want to get to the point, and I'm healing myself to get to the point where I feel brave again. And I always show up because I want a young girl to look at herself and see that through all the stuff that I've been through, they could make it too. And I want them to see themselves in a position of leadership with so much love, and a beat face, knowing that one day they could do whatever they dream they want to do. And so that's why I keep on showing up. But it's been hard, and I never thought I would say this like so public, you know, but I feel that it's necessary to let go as I enter 2021, is to let go of some of the pain and to let go of that fear and really step into my power and to reclaim my bravery, you know?
Wow. I appreciate you being so vulnerable, Carmen. And that's what I love about you, is that through your truth, through your story, you inspire me. From the chat, it seems like you inspire a ton of other folks. And so know I have your back always. I want to support you and definitely appreciate you for continuing to put yourself out there, even in the midst of pain and even in the midst of attacks. Because that's the kind of leader, that's the kind of sister you are. So thank you. Like, from the bottom of my heart, thank you.
Well, I love you, Greg, and I appreciate you. And so really, really grateful for this opportunity. Again, I think this is really powerful for me to close out my year having this conversation with you and just letting go of some of the things that I have held on to, and to also like be in community with everybody on the chat. Like, what's up, everyone? Like, sending everybody so much love. Feliz Año Nuevo. Have a prosperous new year. You know, really want to share how folks could like follow our work. You know, Like I said, there's a lane for everybody. So if you know how to do graphics, we need you. If you know how to public speak, we need you. If you know how to write, we need you. You know, follow us at Gather Number 4 Justice, as well as at NY Justice League. Go to our website, www.gatheringforjustice.org. You could follow me at MS Lady Justice 1, Miss Lady Justice 1. And then Greg, how they following you?
Awesome. Look at you. Look, not only you gave me the chance to look. Come on, Carmen. I see you. I appreciate you. You can follow Can't Stop Won't Stop, CSWS Consulting, and of course, I'm at Gregory Sandana, CENDANA. Wow. Thank you so much again, Carmen, for taking the time. I can't wait until we can be in person again, where I can give you a hug and we can break some bread. Everyone, please be safe, stay healthy, and we'll look forward to building with you and dreaming with you in the new year.
Yes. Bye. Ciao.
Take care.